Thank you, panelists, for sharing your valuable insights, views, and experience. Well, it was quite a good start for all of us, indeed. And now moving on to the next segment, the second power-packed plenary discussion is on reimagining digital identities in the paradigm of Web 3.0. We're going to be having three dignitaries join us virtually here with us. We're going to be having Mr. Gokul Tirumalai, Success Amplifier from Vlinder Labs. We're going to be also joining Mr. Ravikant Agarwal, VP Strategy Polygon, and Mr. Ajeet Hatti, Founder Director PureID. So over to the gentlemen, please.
Hi all, good morning.
Hi everyone.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get my screen shared. Can you see the screen? Can you guys see the screen, Ravi?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, everyone. And thank you, DSCI, for organizing this plenary session on reimagining digital identities in the paradigm of Web 3.0. We have the honor of having distinguished guests on the panel. Let me take a brief moment to introduce you, my co-panelist. Mr. Ravikant Agarwal is the VP of Strategy at Polygon. If you don't know Polygon, probably you're not living on Earth. So Polygon does scalable solutions, provides scalable solutions on blockchains. Almost the whole world is on top of it. And it's from India, right? And we have Ajeet Hatti. He is the founder of PureID, which does passwordless authentication. And I'm Gokul Tirumalai. I'm from Vlinder Labs, and we do blockchain-based solutions. And we have our platform deployed for digital identities all over the world. And it gives me great pleasure to actually bring up this topic. Before that, just a 2-minute introduction from each of our panelists, just to tell about what they do and just give us a brief intro. Go ahead, Ravi, first you, please.
Sure. Hi, thank you. Thank you, DSCI, for organizing thing. A quick introduction about myself. I am Ravi Agrawal, VP of Strategy at Polygon. Primarily look after some of the key initiatives, new product launches, mergers and acquisitions. At the same time, look after the ecosystem growth. In the past, I've been a management consultant for 17 years, providing consulting to large banking and financial clients. I also had a small instinct of running my own blockchain startup in the past.
Go ahead, Ajeet.
Ajeet.
Hello all, a very good morning. My name is Ajeet Hatti and I'm founder of PureID. We provide breach resilient identity and trust platform. Many of our customers are from fintech, banking and edutech and tech sector. I have been working in the field of information security, especially cryptography, from last 17 years now. And you also know me for being a founder of the hackers community called Null. So that's about me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ajeet. My name is Gokul, and Vlinder Labs has been doing blockchain solutions from 2018, and we have deployed some unique blockchain-based digital ID solutions in the Caribbean, Canada, India. We have verifier status for digital identities, and we are also part of National COE, which comes under DSCI. So we are proud to be part of the organization which comes under DSCI. Thank you very much. So we'll straight away go to our presentation. We have quite a few slides and also prepared a few questions for you all. First, we'll begin with Mr. Ravikant.
Thank you, Gokul. So I think if if we wanted to get a glimpse in terms of what are we dealing with when we are talking about digital identity, I would like to take your attention on the first slide where we're talking about the evolution of identity. Identity is not a new topic. We have been always talking about the identity either in the offline world or in the digital world. So Gokul, if you go to the first slide.
Yeah, let me get back. There seems to be a problem. 1 second.
Sure. So in the meantime, in the very first era when we were talking about the digital identity, it has been always one-on-one. And what I mean by that is when we are dealing with one organization gives us a user ID and password that we use to deal with that particular organization. That kind of a model is still valid. We are dealing with, let's say, our particular bank, and we get the bank user ID password. We go to our university, we have a user ID password associated to that. So that's a siloed identity where we maintain multiple identities because we are dealing with multiple organizations. Then we move to a new era where the evolution with the social media companies came in, Facebook, LinkedIn, and what they started doing is they started giving us a federated identity where we can use one identity to connect to multiple organizations. That has solved a problem in terms of user not creating multiple identity, and one identity can be linked to different accesses across the organization. However, the problem of centralization still exists. And that's where the decentralized ID or the new form of identity, which is the self-sovereign identity, is showing up very, very promisingly. Now, with this decentralized identity or self-sovereign identity, we are getting into an era which has very interesting aspect to be considered. If we move on to the next slide, Gokul, I would like to touch base in terms of what are some of the some of the key criteria that one should look at when we are talking about the next generation of the identity. So on some of the aspect for the next slide, I would be talking about why it is important that we should have a decentralized and a self-sovereign and a permissionless identity. So first of all, the identity that we get are being typically controlled by a third party. And that's where if a user wanted to get the control of their identity, it has to be in a decentralized format or a self-sovereign format. And another keyword that I've used, if you remember, is a permissionless. And this is where my understanding is that everyone is allowed to issue information about someone's identity, but the right is no longer reserved. And that's where we wanted to have a permissionless identity system, which is not really controlled. There should be a degree of control, but it should be permissionless. The second bullet point is talking about private and non-PII based information authentication. And as I'm sure many of us are aware about the PII information, which is the individual's personal information, and that should be kept private when we are talking about authentication. And this is where an interesting, cryptography in the form of zero knowledge is popping up, which is showcasing how we can have the privacy with the help of cryptographic technology. And it is now made possible to verify information about someone's identity in a privacy reserving way, where we don't necessarily disclose a lot of information while we are authenticating a user. Scalability and the private on-chain verification is a very new concept, and this is something that is being adopted by some solutions, and Polygon ID is one of the solutions where we are introducing private on-chain verification. The idea behind that is, when there is a verification being done, there has to be an instant execution of the next step. And if we are talking about a Web3 or a decentralized way, that means we are talking about how can we make that happen using smart contracts. So if the authentication has been done or the verification has been done, the next step should be automatically triggered within the smart contract. And that's what we actually mean by on-chain verification and execution, which is opening up a whole new set of use cases possible. The next one is compatibility with the existing standard. And this is going to be very crucial, because when we are moving to a new identity standard, we cannot leave away what we have built over past few decades. And that's where alignment or compatibility with the existing standard should be there. So these are some of the very key concepts which we feel are very important for the next generation of identity. Moving on to the next point, I wanted to also share a perspective of how the next generation identity would be more relevant for Web3 world. So looking at the next slide, if we wanted to dissect how the next generation identity would help into Web3. I'm sure many of us are excited about the component that Web3 provides, right? So just to talk about Web3 components, we are, actually entering into a very interesting era of internet that empowers user over the network, right? So when we talk about Web3, many of us would be able to correlate the Yahoo generation where we used to go and read the information. That's the read-only Web1 era. Web2 era is the social media era where we read and write and exchange information. But with Web3 era, we are entering into a situation where we are going to be owning that data. And that's where, if we are talking about Web3 era, digital identity is going to be playing a very, very crucial role. And that's where I wanted to talk about four aspects where Web3 would be impacted with the digital identity. The first one starting with the ownership. And in the Web2 era, we are not owning the data, right? So if, let's say, if we are generating so much of data on LinkedIn, Yahoo, LinkedIn, Facebook, and many other platforms, I take an example of, let's say, an Uber driver. If he's driving Uber and he's getting testimonial from his customer, but all those testimonials are held by Uber platform. I, as a user, don't own that data, right? So owning your data is going to be an important aspect for Web3 perspective, and that can be made possible with the help of digital identity. Additionally, as we are moving along with the digital world, entering into various aspects, all our touch points are getting online. We are generating more data, and that's where again the importance of owning the data become much more vital and again achievable using the decentralized identity. Shifting gears, going to the experiences. With Web3 applications, we are talking about metaverses, we are talking about NFT platforms, and different types of applications that are built using Web3, DeFi applications, and various others. Interacting with those applications again can be simplified if we are talking about a Web3 native digital identity. So that's going to be very crucial. When I talk about reputation, the thought that is going in my mind is today's identity gives us access or no access. So that's very binary in terms of having access or no access. But with reputation based ranking or reputation score that can be made possible with the help of digital identity, we can evolve with a various new form of customer engagement. So we can have tiering with the customer engagement based upon the reputational score that is out there. So you get tier 1 access if you have made this kind of score. Let's say you made an X score, you get tier 2 access if you are making a Y score. So that would evolve a new way of interacting with the customers, and the customer engagement model would be very, very interesting in the coming time. Multi-persona is where I wanted to give a perspective that many of us connect identity to only KYC. However, there are many more aspects when we talk about identity, and this is primarily, as an individual at home, I'm different, and in the college or in the universities, I'm a different persona. At work, I'm a different persona. With friends, I'm a different persona, and all this different persona require a different form of credentials, different form of identity for me to share my information, share my exchange my information. And that's where again digital identity can help us to create those level of persona and selectively share those information when we are in a different circle. Last but not the least is privacy. And this is where the concept related to ZK based ID, zero knowledge based identity, would be very crucial. Something that we own. We do selective disclosure. We only disclose yes and no kind of information instead of giving more data, and that also help us to disconnect us from the social media player to create a digital profile. So if I'm traveling from one place to another, and I use typically my email ID to make my flight booking, my hotel booking, my restaurant booking, there is a digital persona that can be created using the same identifier. However, with the new form identity, what we are able to achieve is we can disconnect all those journey, still have the control of our all of our reservations. However, we disconnect and not give anybody an access that a person is traveling from place A to B, going to be staying in a hotel at ABC, and then going few other fun things. So how can we disconnect that? That is made possible with the help of digital identity. So to summarize, I feel that it's very important era that we are entering in the digital identity space, and very critical for the Web3.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ravi. You summarized actually maybe 30 years of digital identity journey in a very short time. And folks, that is what Web3 is. Web3 is where you get to own your credentials, your identity, and you have a lot more control. So next we bring up Ajeet. Go ahead, Ajeet.
Thank you, Ravikant, for such a wonderful opening. Thanks, Gokul. So let me start with the question. So this is the picture of Wolfgang. He's a former interior minister of Germany and a lawyer and active politician. So what's wrong in the picture is just his palm can be seen, and with a high resolution image, you can take his fingerprints. And now what we are seeing is in the Web 3.0, the authentication or identities are being verified using the biometrics or behavioral or combination of these, right? So because here you are your identity, and that is proven primarily by biometrics, right? Now Wolfgang's accounts were hacked by lifting up his fingerprints from the glass that he had used, right? So very terrifying scenario, and that's where we are heading. So biometrics are good as long as your biometrics stays on the device or in your wallet, and they don't cross the boundary of your device on which you prove your identity, right? So yes, Web 3.0 brings us a lot of good possibilities, more privacy, etc. But again, the insecurity sides of it are very, very scary, and that can be tackled with very thoughtful building of the technology, which many of the people are doing, and few of them are already on the panel. Next, if we move on. Blockchain forms the basis of Web 3.0 because that gives the distributed and decentralized access to the information that we're having. Okay, but the question is, what is blockchain? So if you have multiple nodes of ledger, okay, what it means essentially is there are multiple copies of your data, and that is something which you cannot wipe off. If I want to erase my digital footprint on internet today, it's very, very difficult. But going ahead, if everything is on blockchain, again, that's difficult, right? Now, what we can do when we are using Web 3.0 and blockchain is we have to focus on having the de-anonymized data or the proof of data on the blockchain rather than the data itself, right? And we have to provide convenience means to de-anonymize data whenever it is needed. Okay, so blockchain, yes, again, a scary side of it, but with smart technology, smart cryptography, that again can be managed, right? Next, if we move on, fintechs will be needing users some data, okay, or users identities, some aspects of users identities to create accountability, traceability, and attribution, right? Now, if we go with no data at all, then having that will be a bit difficult. Okay, so mid path between the complete data disclosure and zero knowledge proof, where accountability can be a bit difficult, is zero data initiative. You can have proof of data rather than having the actual data, right? So this again helps you to maintain excellent privacy for the user, and at the same time you don't hold the data, because what we have seen is many banks, fintech, and many other companies, they collect the data with a lot of efforts and then put a lot of efforts and money and resources to secure that data, right? But rather than that, we can leverage the data which is already present with agencies like UIDAI, Aadhaar, etc. Right? If we can leverage that, though it is centralized, but again, it is worth for us to pay and use that data for verification rather than everyone holding the same copy of data. If I'm today generating a self-sovereign identity for me, everyone will be asking for my passport, my Aadhaar card, my driving license, and then deriving some digital image of that, and then verifying me based on the keys issued with that, right? So in a way, I'm giving out my data to all these platforms, right? So that is essential for Web 3.0's working, but we can move away from that model. Okay, if we have these government issued IDs placed at one place and other players can just leverage that, that will be more efficient and more secure and manageable thing. Okay, so these are a few points I would like to put on the table, and I will pass it on back to Gokul, and we can have the discussion around these points going ahead. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ajeet. You brought up some great issues here, challenges in somebody owning their digital identity, the various forms of digital identity, and what happens if the data, the digital identity data, is not handled correctly by the verifier or whoever they're sharing the data with. That is beautiful. So that's one of the problems with owning the data and giving it to somebody else and not having any control over it. So next stage, I'm going to just go through two scenarios in fintech. We understand the audience is fintech largely, and also people want to understand identities. So we are talking about some use case here. Okay, the first, this is real use case which I picked up from the US. If you see, typically if you want to get some loan, you want to get some mortgage done, etc. There's a long process. You need to apply, submit papers. That takes time. And like what our panelists said, you have multiple identities. Something to deal with your identity with the government, something to do with your work identity, something with your university credentials. Like Ravikant said, they're all siloed. That means, when somebody needs to verify them, they have to go to 5 independent institutions to get them verified. And that takes its own time. And after that, you need to wait for your turn to come through. It's not just a physical wait. It can be a long wait just sitting at home. And finally, you get some disbursement. At the start of COVID, this became a gigantic problem because people didn't want to go to a bank or to get, meet people. At that point, along with whatever we saw, there was huge unemployment issues. And in the US and many parts of the world, there were huge backlogs for unemployment benefits. They couldn't progress and make those, provide the benefits for 6 months. And for anybody not having work and money, 6 months is a very long time to wait. And same is the case with so many other issues where people are still trying to identify and verify in siloed way, right? That's one problem which got exacerbated with a lot of online applications in the last 2 years. One second. The slide is taking a long time. So what happens is, here, another example is, say somebody walks into any institution and needs to give their ID. This is what happens if you give a physical ID. You give your entire data to them, and they have a physical copy of that, and you have no control over what can happen with that. And not only that, in some IDs, it also contains some personal information, like in America, Canada, it also reveals your height, eye color, weight, along with your signature and address. That is personally identifiable information, which gets stored by somebody who probably you're not wanting to store for a very long time. And once you give it, they have it with them. So that's another problem, which is becoming very common in the Web3 world, where people's identities get stolen, right? So these are the challenges which, while we reimagine the digital identities for the future, these are the challenges which we try to solve. And the way to do that is giving people more control over their identities. So just like how Ravi said, and Ajeet was talking about, when people get to own their identities, they are called verified credentials. That means they have a way to hold on credentials which are pre-verified. And because they're pre-verified, they can share with other people whenever they want in a secure way, and also have a lot of control over what gets seen or who gets to see them. And that's one way of having control, as the self-sovereign identity. The person owns the credential. That is one way of getting it. So when the person gets to have control over their credentials, and it is they who share it with a verifier, that means they also control who the verifier is, how long they store, etc. So what does it do? Now, biometrics is one way to add to verification, but there are so many other ways to actually verify that the person who is sharing is coming from his account and it is shared securely. And this is what digitization and Web3 can do for you. You can share your credentials very quickly and get expedited services, because now the bank or fintech or any other organization is not looking at dealing with 5 different entities for verification. Instead, they're getting pre-verified credentials or credentials which don't need to be verified with the issuer again. So they're saving a lot of time. And that's what Web3 technologies can do for you, right? So likewise, if we spoke about zero-knowledge proof, zero-knowledge proof is a concept where a person can identify themselves without revealing too much information to the verifier. I'm just getting up my next slide. Sorry for the bandwidth issue. So with zero knowledge proof, when a person wants to share the credential, right, they would have a way to specify that they only want to share their name and maybe just the city and the photo. And that's what somebody might need to identify themselves at a particular organization for a particular specific task. Or they can just also share saying that I'm of legal drinking age. And that's the only information they get to share. They don't share their name, photo, age, or any other information, including the ID number, etc. So that is where the person owning the credential has complete control. And because it is shared system to system in a secure way, nobody gets to keep a copy of the credential or details of the credential. And some of the important things which can happen is the person can share it temporarily instead of sharing it permanently, right? That means they only share the information they want for the duration for which they want the verifier to hold the credential. So that is kind of giving the person a control, every individual a control over their identity, instead of saying, please go verify it and get all my details associated with a particular identity from the issuer, right? So there are huge benefits for the ecosystems. First of all, you become compliant with data protection laws. You enable better life for the citizens. That's what the issuers get to do. And you can focus more on the core functionalities as opposed to verifying. So verifying itself is a huge task. Whenever it's even more if it is a physical verification, somebody gets a physical document to verify, right? And for citizens, it becomes easy and secure sharing and storing of credentials. And selective disclosure is what we discussed. They can disclose only the information which they want to share, and they have ownership and view of who actually sees those credentials. For the institution, we reduce the time of verification. In Web3 world, when a lot of things are happening online and want to verify somebody instantly, this helps. Verifying somebody in real time is probably going to be very critical. And remote KYC is one of them, and it's becoming more and more relevant in post-COVID world, because the world moved to online verification, and the entire process got reduced to hours, right, for verification instead of weeks. That brings us to the end of the planned presentation set of data. So we will look at the Q&A now. First, let me ask one question, which is very common. We'll go around the table and discuss that. First, what is DigiLocker and how is that going to help us with Web 3.0, and whether Web 3.0 and DigiLocker go hand in hand? So that's the first question which we are going to take. So Ravi, do you want to go first?
Sure. Thanks, Gokul. By the way, very insightful talk from your and Ajeet's side. So I think DigiLocker provides, a cutting edge way in terms of, first of all, getting the secured document and information stored in one place, and then gives, again, a lot of flexibility in terms of enabling the integration with the third parties with the help of API. However, what I feel is, again, when we talk about Web3 native digital identity or the information that a user should be owning, DigiLocker provides an interim stage, but it is still centralized. It is not something that is controlled by users. So I would be, very happy to see maybe an enhanced version where, again, we go back to the ownership of the data back to the user, if that kind of a enhancement is out there. And additionally, if the selective disclosure kind of a feature be also included, so that we don't have to again share my entire Aadhaar card for when I'm at the airport to show my nationality or just to verify myself. So I think it's a very interesting interim stage, and we take a pride in terms of saying that such kind of a solution has been created for the large scale population that we have in India, and we were able to effectively make that place in the market. But enhanced version in terms of decentralization and selective disclosure would be very helpful for the Web3 perspective.
Wonderful. Thank you for that perspective, Ravi. Ajeet, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I have same opinion as Ravikant. Okay, so DigiLocker is a good service. I can keep my verified government provided documents over there, and I can use that to prove my identity. But then again, I should have more control over there. So what aspects or what attributes I need to present. But again, distributed versus centralized. So if it is at one place, it is better to guard, okay, and better to revoke, better to change if at all we have to do that. But if it is distributed, then we have to choose between that dilemma, right? And you have better traceability, and you have more trusted party which is holding my data, and third parties can leverage the trust of that party or reputation of that party. But if we have so many identity providers, okay, then it becomes a problem that whom to trust, why to trust, okay, and how much to trust, right? So in that sense, DigiLocker has huge value, but yes, it has to evolve.
Wonderful. Thanks for the perspective. And at Vlinder, we have integrated with DigiLocker, but it's coming from the individual user, and they allow us to pick up certain credentials which they want, and in turn, we use those credentials shared by the individuals from DigiLocker and package it into another verified credential which a bank might want. So we are using DigiLocker, and yes, DigiLocker has a long way to go, but it is one of the biggest repositories which is going to be on the planet, and that's a long way for even India. That's great answers. Well, I have one last question, which is again a very common question which comes up. India has Aadhaar, and it is touted worldwide to be one of the earliest and the biggest databases, and phenomenal number of services tied to it in India. And it helps people to identify themselves instantly via an OTP. It also has retina scan and biometrics, including facial and thumbprint. How does Aadhaar initiative and the future of Aadhaar look with Web 3.0 digital identities? And can that be a model for Web 3.0? And what about the other identities which are not controlled by Aadhaar, which may be employment, which may be PAN card, etc.? So that's a question which we get asked. So we'll go around the table again. Ravi, please go ahead.
Sure, interesting perspective. And I think, last part of the question was actually trying to indicate that with Aadhaar, we can sort out certain use cases which required the KYC information or a personal 10 attributes. And I think it's a phenomenal achievement where we can, onboard millions of users for a telecom operator within few months of time, or onboarding onto various other platforms. However, if we are talking about Web3, we are talking about more digitally native identity, and that's where the decentralized identity has to play a bigger role. Outside of KYC, there are various aspects, as we have been talking throughout the panel, right? There are various aspects which also needs to be covered, and there could be again a bootstrap process where we are talking about a similar identity like Aadhaar, but then it has to go again with the concept of ownership back to the user. That is again going in the self-sovereign mode. And how can we have several of this identity? So one of the research says that as an individual, when we are dealing with the online world, we are talking about at least 120 touch points with different service provider online, right? So if you're talking about that 120 odd touch points with different service provider, how can we collate all of them and still it represent by one individual, and then we own that 120 plus identities? So I think it's going to be very interesting, and maintaining the privacy for the user into all this mix is going to be again very crucial. And I believe self-sovereign identity enhanced with the ZK based cryptography on top of it is going to be very crucial in the coming days.
Wonderful. Thanks for that answer, Ravi. Ajeet?
Yeah, I have totally contrary views. So Aadhaar is our biggest assets that we all Indians have, and I guess all the fintech and the banking industry should leverage that. And congratulations, they are already leveraging it, right? I'm uncomfortable giving out my government issued IDs to any third party who will be providing me a self-sovereign identity, right? And my biometrics. Just example, retina scan. If I'm giving my retinal scan to some third party, right? They might on Saturday morning, if I'm giving that, they might know what kind of brand I had based on different time I'm presenting my retina, right? What type of beer might have different effects on my on me based on how much retina I might dilate on the next day, right? So others, they have all the motivation to collect all such data, right? But Aadhaar will not. Okay, that's the assurance I have, right? So all in favor of having Web 3.0 enabled so many identity providers. But then when it comes to masses, if we have centralization over there, then it does help them to have a confidence, and it also makes the things easier for the fintech industries who need to have a verified vendor who is providing them user verification, right? So my views are contrary over there. Web 3.0 fine for all other things, but when it comes to financial industries, yes, I would go to Aadhaar. If it is not perfect, let's make it perfect, or let's start taking steps towards making it better and work for all.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ajeet. Yeah, so let me add my points too. So Aadhaar has come a very long way. World over, when we talk to another country about digital identity, they ask me, Aadhaar, what do you think about Aadhaar? So that's how impressed people are with the database they built, including what the government can do when it needs to absolutely identify one individual. They now have a very good way to identify that. At the same time, like our panelists said, it is definitely exposing a lot more data, and in the wrong hands, it can be totally catastrophic. So that's what even the government is very cautious about, actually enabling Aadhaar and giving it to everybody. Not everybody gets to use the OTP or the retinal scan or fingerprint. They're very, very choosy about that. And uh, Aadhaar is going to go a long way. And we did read recently that the head of Aadhaar wants to look at selective disclosure. So we do see promising things, but looking at the gigantic scale of what India will achieve with Aadhaar, it's going to be very slow and very cautious. While that is happening, I think other companies, other industries who want to handle digital identities, working with Aadhaar might probably have specific use cases where they go faster with many of the things which we discussed. So
Yeah, I think
that is wonderful. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just to add, I think one more aspect that potentially we should be looking is that we are becoming more and more global, right? So with Aadhaar, we certainly can do many more things domestically. But I think when we are talking about Web3, we are talking about global interactions. And for those global interactions, how swiftly and easily it should be verified, I think that's going to be very important. And then to combining some of the attribute which may be generated outside of your, domicile. So I think those aspects would be also very critical for us to consider for some of the use cases that are popping up, and as an individual, if I'm participating in the global applications.
Wonderful. Thank you. We actually exceeded by 7 minutes, but that was a wonderful presentation. Really liked Ravi, Ajeet, your thoughts, phenomenal on what digital identities can do in the Web3 world. So with this, I think we are towards the end, and we would like to say thank you to DSCI, and thanks for having all of us on this presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ravi. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.